welcome to the Liz Career Coaching Podcast. I am so excited to have you as a guest today.
Hi, Liz. I'm so excited to be here. This just feels like such a treat that we get to podcast together.
Once again, I was just on your podcast, Happenstance, and I had such a wonderful time and interacting with you. You're a wonderful host, so hopefully I can do the same for you.
I have no doubt.
It was such a treat chatting with you, and it was super exciting. So yes, I'm glad that now I get to interview you.
Yes, so switching it up. I'm excited to be on the other side of the mic tonight.
Yes. So we're gonna dive into plan happenstance, but before we do that, I would love for you to share a little bit of your personal backstory and how that has inspired your current role as a career coach.
Yes, I would love to share this. I think compared to a lot of career coaches that you and I both know, I came into career coaching pretty early on. And actually, when I was an undergraduate student, I kind of had that classic story of changing my major a bunch of times, not really knowing what I wanted to do. And thankfully, I ended up taking a professional writing class where part of that class included resume and cover letter writing, developing a LinkedIn profile, which meant someone from the Career Center came into that class and talked with us. And that class, and really me kind of realizing, oh, I have a knack for this type of thing. I always knew I enjoyed writing, but realizing I really enjoyed that aspect of writing, and then being introduced to a career coach on my college campus led me to actually going to the Career Center and meeting with that person. And through some of those conversations, I do consider myself very lucky that I had kind of that aha moment. And mid conversation with my career coach, I was like, wait. How do I get your job? Like, this is a job. And that career coach was like, yep, you definitely can have this job. They kind of outlined the steps for me going to grad school and all of that type of thing. And I've been on that path ever since. So I went to grad school to study higher ed and student affairs with the sole purpose of getting into career coaching. I did my assistantships in the career centers and my internships in career centers. And that has been the goal ever since.
I am so happy to hear that you were exposed to the career development profession so early on. And I read that on your LinkedIn profile, and I love that, how you're like, how do I get your job?
Yeah.
And so having that early exposure and just thinking like, wait, this is something that I can actually do. And also that, you can have your graduate degree in pretty much anything, right? And just having those internships and those experiences, which has obviously opened doors for you in this field that we both find very rewarding. And so now you've paved your career in career development, and you are a career coach. You're a private career coach. Can you talk a little bit about, what is your purpose and who do you serve?
Yeah. So I really see my purpose as a career coach as being the person who connects the dots. Like, that's what I love doing, with whether I'm working with clients, students, whoever it may be. It's being that person that can connect the dots. So looking at someone's education, their skills, their experience, the things they're passionate about, their strengths, their interests, and being that person that can kind of help put it all together is really where I see my purpose. So whether that be putting it together on a resume, helping them put it together to explore career options, change careers, that type of thing, or put it together to tell their story on the LinkedIn, or in any other facet of kind of the work that we do as career coaches. That's what I see my purpose being, is kind of that connector. And in terms of who I serve, I spent about 5.5, 6 years working strictly in higher education on college campuses, working with students. And then as of January 2022, went out on my own as a private career coach. So at this point in time, I'm working more with younger professionals, 3 to 5 years out of school, but then also with more established professionals who are making kind of those mid-level career changes, and even people who are kind of making their last career move before retirement, which has just been a really fun process in the last year or so to expand kind of my clientele in that way.
Can you share what has that journey been like? Leaving a full-time job to explore this new venture. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, it has been the most exciting and terrifying thing that maybe I've ever done. While working in higher education, I was freelance coaching pretty much that whole time that I was working exclusively in higher ed. So I do feel that I had a lot of buildup to this, and kind of freelancing and private coaching for about 5.5 years while working full time, I think gave me the foundation and the confidence to say, like, okay, I think I can do this. We can at least give it a shot and kind of go out on my own. But it's definitely been, it's kind of, we're at a nice point where I'm almost at the 1 year mark being exclusively out on my own. And it has been really rewarding in the sense that I get to work with quite a wide range of people, but also in the fact that, especially after the last couple of years, I've really loved having the freedom that I've had this year to work from different locations and to travel while I'm working and all of that, and to build my schedule in the way I want. I think today's a really great example. It's a Monday when we're recording this, and I had a couple client calls this afternoon. We're recording in the evening. I have a few more evening calls. So I gave myself the morning off, which was really great to kind of start the week by not working and then have a heavier night. But I really enjoyed that freedom. But it's definitely an adventure kind of going out on your own like this.
Well, first of all, kudos. I find it very admirable
Mhm.
to be able to take that risk. We talk about the importance of taking risks and really going after
Yeah.
what you want. And that can be scary and out of the comfort zone, which you and I talked about in your podcast, and you're doing it. And
Yeah.
so that, I think it's incredible. And I just, I'm in awe of it. And I cannot wait to continue seeing your journey.
Yeah. I think this kind of leads into happenstance nicely, and kind of the planned and unplanned aspects of it. But for me, kind of making this decision, I always say it was a life decision kind of doing this. And I really loved the job that I had in higher education, and I loved the team that I was working with, and I loved the work that I was doing there. And it was very centered around experiential education and internships and all of that. But the reality for me was that I was more than 6 hours away from where I kind of grew up, where my family is, where my community is, and that type of thing. And prior to working in that job, I had also been living even further away. So I'd kind of been away from quote unquote home, my home state, for more than 7 years. And I think the pandemic, we all kind of reevaluated priorities and everything. And I just got to that point where I was like, now is the time to take the risk. It felt like as safe of a time as possible for me to take the risk, where I don't have a lot of other responsibilities or people that I need to be thinking about in kind of taking this leap. And so while it definitely is a risk, there was some of that security in it of knowing that, like, okay, it's just like me to figure this out, and I can do that. And it provided me with that freedom to move back to my home state and to be closer to my family and my community and that type of thing, which has also just been a really wonderful aspect of the last year.
Oh, that's absolutely great. I love hearing those stories.
Mm.
As career coaches, we learn about all different types of career theories. And one in particular that I'm a fan of is happenstance learning theory. And so again, you have a whole podcast named after it. Maybe can you walk us through, for people who may not be familiar with this theory, what is planned happenstance?
Yes, I would love to. I would love to talk about that. The planned happenstance learning theory was coined by John Crumboltz, and he has done a lot of research in kind of this realm of career development and learning theories and that type of thing. But essentially, the theory looks at how and why people make career decisions, And this theory basically explains that individuals, like, you can't predict essentially what your career is going to be, and that there are hundreds, thousands, limitless moments throughout our lives from the time that we're born that impact the decisions that we make and how it all kind of comes together to lead us down a specific path. So that's kind of the theory in a nutshell. And some of the aspects that I really love about it is that it is both the planned and the unplanned, and how we can make very intentional career decisions that lead us down a specific path. But there are also always these unexpected and unplanned for things that happen in life, in our careers, throughout our education, and all these other aspects that, whether we recognize it or not, also influence our careers. So that's an aspect of the theory. And then the fact that we can cultivate these happenstance kind of moments to also then adjust our career trajectory and all of that. So this theory is kind of really rooted in that. And I think just gives a nice lens to thinking about our careers, how we end up in certain places, and also knowing that there's possibility. I think that's what I love about it so much, is that it's partially that, like, connecting the dots type of thing, but also just opening up our eyes to how much possibility there is for different career options.
Oh, perfectly said. Yes. Great understanding of the theory.
I'm
And
not sure.
oh,
Sorry, my watch just thought I was talking to her.
oh yeah, that happens all the time. That's what's with our technology, right? uh what I love about this theory is just what you were saying. It allows us that space for curiosity,
Mm,
taking risks, but most importantly, putting yourself out there,
yeah.
right? I know, and I know we're gonna dive into this more, and I know I'm gonna be geeking out, and I know you're gonna be geeking out. I just love, like, I call them like the chill moments
Hmm.
where, people share with you, like, oh, I went to this event and I had no expectation, and I end up connecting with this person that I end up getting this job. I think about one of my students. She was like, I was at a Walgreens line, and she's like talking to her friend about, like, oh, I really need to find this internship. And that this person's in front of them was like, oh, I overheard the conversation. I actually work for so and so company. Here's my card. It's like, how? Like, when you hear
Hmm.
these stories, how? And so I absolutely love that. So one of the things that I learned from you, from your Clifton strengths, is that you are, one of your strengths is maximizer. Is that
Hmm.
correct?
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
And I feel that we use our strengths in the work that we do.
Mhm.
So, as a maximizer, how does one maximize plan happenstance in our career development?
I love this question, and I love that we're incorporating strengths into it. And I think that this is one of the things that I love about the theory, is that you can quite literally maximize your happenstance moments. You can maximize your planned and unplanned moments and how that all happens. And I think one of the biggest ways to do that is a general openness to opportunities, to conversations, to people. So, hearing that story of your student, like, being in a line and someone overhearing them, that can be one in a million, just by putting yourself in those scenarios. Which, how easy is it to find a coffee shop? That's a great, like, that is hopefully easy for everyone to kind of put yourself in that scenario. But thinking about, being intentional about having a conversation with a friend, like, maybe the intention isn't that someone's going to overhear it and that then you'll get an internship or a job, but having that intentional conversation can mean that that happens. It also can mean that then your friend knows exactly what you're thinking about looking for, whether it be an internship or job. And that can then lead to them being like, hey, I know someone who I could connect you with, or I heard about this thing. So having that kind of intentionality behind it, I think, is an aspect of it. Being open-minded can maximize those opportunities. And then, just like you said, putting yourself in different scenarios, whether that be physically going to a networking event or some other type of function and that type of thing. It could be putting yourself in a scenario where you're reaching out to people on LinkedIn, or you're adding a comment to a post or an article, or you're throwing your name in the hat for a speaking opportunity or other type of thing. So I really think maximizing your happenstance moments comes from those small risks, comes from being intentional, comes from having conversations, and also thinking about the other places where we can have career related conversations. So even if it's not a networking event, but if you like really love rock climbing and you're going to a rock climbing gym, maybe you run into someone who you can then be like, hey, what do you do? You know, if you're seeing someone every Tuesday at the rock climbing gym and you have a conversation with them, that can be a happenstance moment then.
Yeah, having the conversations and like you said, being intentional. I think that's very important too, right? That not, and it doesn't mean that things are going to fall on your lap. There
Right.
are stories like that. However, the intentionality behind it is also very key.
Mhm.
But knowing that these things can occur in unexpected places,
Right.
and being prepared.
Mhm.
So, Cassie, can you share maybe one of your happenstance moments?
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about this all day of like what happenstance moments. And I want to pick a fun one. I think this is fun anyways, in that throughout kind of undergrad, like I said, I changed my major many times. And at one point throughout my undergraduate experience, my kind of career goals, my plan was to get into wedding planning and kind of event planning on that scale of things. And so I had done an event planning internship prior to formally deciding I was going to go to grad school and go the career coaching route. I had actually been offered a full-time wedding planning job and was kind of debating like, do I go into wedding planning? Do I go to grad school? Like, what is that step? And I was kind of at that fork in the road. And ultimately, I chose grad school and career coaching and all of that. But it was something that just kind of floated off to the side, didn't really think about it that much. And a couple years later, post grad school, post a bunch of other things, I had a friend text me one day out of the blue and she was like, hey, this is really random, but I was talking to my aunt. My cousin just got engaged. They're planning a wedding in their backyard. They really need a lot of help. And I just thought, like, you know a lot about weddings and events, and like you did that internship. Would you be interested? And I was like, huh, would I be interested? And I said yes to that opportunity and got paid to help plan this wedding and kind of be the day of coordinator and use that knowledge basis and experience in a really different way, which was a total happenstance moment out of the blue, unexpected. It happened in this last year while, you know, I'm kind of doing the freelance thing and out on my own. So just another way to earn some money. And it was such a fun experience. And someone was at that wedding who was like, hey, I'm getting married and I'm also doing a backyard wedding in, 9 months or whatever. Like, would you want to plan my wedding? So that led to another opportunity. So just kind of a fun full circle moment for me. I think pure happenstance that my friend even remembered that I had done that, way back in undergrad. And then an additional happenstance moment on top of that, that someone else was like, oh, you helped plan this one? I'm doing the exact same thing in 9 months. Like, you want to be part of this wedding too? And has kind of created this fun little side thing. I don't even want to call it a side gig, but this fun side thing where I get to be involved in this other career path that at one point in my life, I more or less, like, quote unquote, said no to, right? And didn't choose, has now come back into it. So just been a fun kind of happenstance, like not even moment, but like explosion in the last year.
That is a fun story. And I like it for so many different reasons. When we work with students, but also established professionals, people sometimes have to make those choices where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay, this is a more practical, route.
Yeah.
But then we do have other interests that maybe are outside of the scope of whatever we decide our career path is going to look like. But I think that that's still there.
Yeah.
And it's important to explore them and still be kind of, having that on the back of mind. And so the reason why I love your story is that, it was something that you thought about, but you chose, career development, but that it came back later on and
Mm-hmm.
the timing was right. The timing was just perfect for you. And then the snowball effect where, all about relationship building and people see the good work that you're doing. They're like, hey, come plan my wedding. And so
Right.
now people are hearing this podcast. They're gonna be like, oh,
I know. Well, and I think just like you said, there's often so much pressure to like choose a career, right? And especially working with students and in that setting and even with other professionals kind of throughout all aspects of their career. I think there is this weird societal life, I don't know, pressure that we pick one thing, and that if you're ever at that fork in the road and you're making a decision, very much like I sat at my parents' kitchen table and pored over the numbers and probably cried a bunch of like, do I take this job? Do I go to grad school? Right? Feeling like it was the biggest decision I've ever made in my life. And I have no regrets. Like, I'm so happy that I went to grad school and went this route. But I also think like, what a wonderful example of how that interest, that skill set, like it didn't just leave me because I didn't pick it. And it not only has come in handy with like actual wedding planning types of things, but it's also come in handy with when I've planned events in other aspects, and just kind of that natural strength to make sure that everything's kind of in order and we're following a process and we're getting it done on time and all of that. So, and that's another aspect of happenstance, is that the things that you say yes or no to doesn't mean you're saying no to them forever, and they can come back and kind of impact in different ways.
yes. 110% yes. That was a fun story. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I figured you had, a handful of stories to choose from. One of the things that I enjoy asking, people that I interview are success stories of their, former clients or students. Do you have a success story that you're able to share in regards to how someone benefited from planned, unplanned happenstance?
Yeah. This is also a fun one that I'm excited to tell because it's a little bit more recent. It happened in November. So I was working with a client who is working in entertainment, really looking at opportunities to be a production assistant and get involved with TV shows, movies, that type of thing. And throughout our work together, we obviously did some resume updating, we did some interview coaching and some other aspects of it. But I also really worked with this client to think about who is already in your network, who do you want to be in your network, and what are some opportunities where we can kind of increase these planned happenstance moments, and start to cultivate some other opportunities. And so throughout our work together, we kind of brainstormed. He had done a 2-day production assistant event for a TV channel. They did this big event a couple months ago, and he had developed some good connections with the people there, but hadn't followed up on any of them. So throughout our work together, I was like, what do you have? Emails, phone numbers? Like, what is our connection point? We need to be reaching back out to those people. And depending on who they were, he made some decisions about some people he just invited for coffee. Some people was just a quick message of, hey, I really enjoyed working with you on this event. Like, thanks so much for your time, etc. Like very kind of brief messages. But from that, it then led to actual coffee meetups, other exchanges via email and LinkedIn and that type of thing. And through doing that, he was then asked to help as a production assistant for the Macy's Day Thanksgiving parade, which was very cool to participate in that. And then from there was able to reconnect with some other people who were in high up positions kind of in that world. And through, these handful of events and follow-ups, then landed a full-time job that was never even posted, probably wouldn't have been advertised, probably would have gotten hundreds of applicants, or something like that. But I think just a really nice example of both creating those opportunities by sending a quick message, and then also using these events. Like, I think it could be really easy to be like, oh, that's a 2-day thing and it's not a full-time job, I'm not going to waste my time with it. But by putting himself in that scenario, showing people how he can be a good at his job, a good worker and that type of thing, and really cultivating those relationships, a couple 2-day events, Macy's Day Parade, that's cool to be part of, and then full-time job, which is just a fun fun little trajectory there.
I love that story because you could never have predicted that, right?
Right.
As coaching the student, you can be like, well, if you go to this, like that could potentially lead to a full-time job. I mean, we
Right.
know that this can happen, but that's not how you set it up for them, right? It's like, hey, it can open doors. It's about connecting with people, and we can't see 5 steps down the road.
Right. Yeah. And even, sending those initial messages to follow up, that was really just a practice in like, let's see who will engage in those conversations. And more so, let's gather as much information as we can. Who else do they know that they can connect you with? Like that initial step of encouraging him to send those messages and to follow up was both a practice in networking, but also really with the goal of like, okay, you have these initial contacts in the field. Who do they know? Who else can they connect you with? And my initial plan with that really was more networking, more informational interviews, learning about other job opportunities and that type of thing. But what led, right, even unplanned for me, is we kind of took a different turn there, and it led to then people saying like, let's grab coffee, let's talk, this is an event coming up, you should apply to this. I can get you a production assistant job here. Thanksgiving, right? Like we need more help. And then for him, an opportunity to just say yes, to be open to that opportunity and to be like, okay, cool, I'm going to do this 2-day event. And just like you said, I hoped a full-time job was coming from it, but we could have never planned for that. So I think a really nice example.
Very nice example. And this is a good segue into my next question. In thinking about, we're already in December. So
Yeah.
I'm in higher ed. So I'm thinking about, students that are graduating from college, right? So we have our December grads. So those students that are ready to enter the job market, or rather the job search process, from a career coach standpoint, in your experience, what tips do you have for some of our recent grads as they're ready to embark on their job search?
Yes. I think 2 key things I'll focus on here. One, and I think this applies to anyone, but especially students, is that when you're doing this kind of like big job search, applying to a lot of things, being really mindful with your time, I think is important. And creating momentum with this type of job search. So I work with a lot of students and job seekers in general who kind of get into these panicked cycles with job searching where, you kind of maybe have a rough day. It's a Tuesday or something. Suddenly it's 9:00 at night and you're doing that like frantic scrolling, applying, and that type of thing. And it just doesn't work. It's just not fun. So being kind of intentional with your time, I think if you can work into, if you're at the end of the semester, winter break, moving into whatever's next, like scheduling that time, giving yourself kind of a cutoff to say, I'm going to job search for an hour today, or maybe it's 30 minutes 3 times a week, whatever works for you. But giving yourself that structure, I think, is really important. And also recognizing that there's more to job searching than just hitting apply on a bunch of things. So recognizing that as part of it too, that you can use some of that time to be sending messages on LinkedIn, or to be tailoring a cover letter, or updating your resume, or whatever it may be, is a really important like foundational piece of job searching. And then the second piece, I have to bring Happenstance into it. I think looking for ways to kind of maximize those opportunities and to take advantage of the people that you're already connected with, thinking about your extended network, having intentional conversations. I always say, like, people can't help you if they don't know what you're looking for. So even just having conversations with the people that you feel comfortable having them with, if that's your friends, if that's your family, if that's a professor that you've developed a good relationship with, or a current or past supervisor or something like that. But if people know what you're looking for, they can better help you find those things. So cultivating those opportunities. And then I think also just being open. I work and have worked with a lot of students who are really focused in on like their first job out of school being at that like huge brand name company. And if that's your goal, I love that for you so much. But I think a lot of people, if we can be a little bit open to like, what is that smaller company that maybe doesn't come with the like flashy brand name or something, but has a really cool job and is really willing to train you and provide different opportunities and that type of thing, or being open to doing the work that you want to do in a different setting can really cultivate some cool opportunities that can like launch your career in a totally different way. And I think there's a lot of happenstance wrapped into that too. But being open to those different opportunities as they come or as you see them can be really great to kind of go into your job search with that perspective.
Those are all some fabulous gems that I would love for every recent grad that is ready for their job search to really think about, because you do have to keep an open mind.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I was guilty of this as well. Job searching is that we kind of are focused on like that organization, that specific job title. This is what I need to do.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's, you have to go through a different route that will maybe ultimately get you to where you want to go, but being open. And I really love what you mentioned is that sometimes, people focus on these big brand organizations, and like nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But there are some fantastic organizations out there that people are not aware of.
Right.
And how do you discover those? It's through putting yourself out there, talking to people, leveraging LinkedIn, talking to your career coach. So yeah, there's different ways to discover what you may not be aware of.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, can just really provide just different types of experiences. I think a good example is that I used to work with a lot of students who were in business, accounting, and like really focused on those big firms. That's what they wanted. And I think, again, that's so great for so many people and it makes a lot of sense. But I also think when you're in a really big organization like that, that's where you're going to go in, you're on a team, you do this one job, and you're kind of like, that's what you do. And there are maybe a lot of other wonderful perks that come with that. But you could be doing that same line of work at a smaller organization or in a different industry. I always kind of tell students, I'm like, most organizations have someone who's doing like the books, right? There's someone in like a business type of realm. And so there can be a really unique lens where maybe you are in that like business realm, but you're in a totally different industry and you're getting to gain a bunch of experience in a different way and maybe move up a little bit faster or move around and determine in that first year or two of like, what skills do I really want to be using? Where do I feel like my strengths are really coming through, and trying a lot of different things out. And it can also just kind of open the door that if you're open to these other industries or other like environments to do the same job, I think that can just lead to some really cool things.
Agreed. Yes. So this advice, I mean, I think it could be, like you said, applicable to anyone. But focusing on, because some of the people that listen to my podcast are college students, but then also, mid-career people that are maybe ready for that next career move. Do you have any maybe tailored advice for someone that has more work experience in how they can make that next career move with the lens of plan happenstance?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest things I recognize in working with people who are more established in their career and kind of ready to make that move is that there's often a question of like, can I make a move? And feeling kind of stuck in a specific job title, specific industry, and that type of thing. So I think one of the first things is to really kind of evaluate for yourself or with a coach, like, what are the most important things to you, both in terms of like what you want and need in a future job, but also thinking about what skills am I using in this current role or have I used throughout my career that I want to be using in that next role? Because I think a big piece of that decision making if you're just switching companies or just switching industries, like whatever that kind of next move is, really has to start with that foundation of like, what do you want and need out of whatever comes next? So getting very clear on that, I think is number one. And then a second kind of piece of that is not being afraid to reach out to that really extended network. If you're more established in your career, that likely means you've worked with more people, you've been at more companies, you've, interacted with more people both throughout your life, but also then in a work and professional setting. And I know I work with a lot of people who are like, I know someone who does this thing that I want to do, but I haven't talked to them in 10 years. Or I'm connected to this person on LinkedIn, but I don't even know how to start that message. And I think in a lot of scenarios, we just work ourselves up with it. I know I used to with networking too, of like, I can't possibly reach out to that person. I haven't emailed them in a year. And that's where I'm just a big believer in use the calendar to your advantage. As the beginning of 2023, like January, February, that's a great time to send a message that's like, hey, so-and-so, I hope your year is off to a great start. Here's what I'm doing. And you have that intro, use it to your advantage. And I also think people are willing to help. Also, the people who respond, they're the ones who are willing to help, right? If someone doesn't respond, probably don't want their help anyways. But if someone is responding, that's great. And I think so often we think that people get these messages and they're like, oh my God, and slam their computer and walk away. And I think more often than not, people are really happy to get these messages, to get an update from someone that they haven't talked to in a while, and to, especially when it's genuine and that type of thing, and to help when they can. And I also just believe that a lot of times if people aren't responding, it's because they've, read the message, read the email, they got distracted and they just forgot. So I guess my part 2 of that would be, don't be afraid to follow up either, because we have all been in a scenario where that message just slips through a little bit.
No, and that's a really good point, because I agree that a lot of times, people that are a little bit more established, sometimes that barrier is, oh, I haven't talked to this person in a long time, or I'm a little bit intimidated about letting people in my network know that I'm trying to make a change.
Right.
And so I think it helps to work with a mentor or an accountability partner to help, boost that confidence, to reach out, follow up, because you're right. I think that there's a higher likelihood that someone will respond and that
Yeah.
they're going to want to help you.
Mhm.
And then kind of tying it back to happenstance, I feel that, I don't know if this has happened to you, and I'm going to say most likely yes, where you learn about an opportunity or something, and then someone reaches out to you and you're like, wait a minute, someone just sent me information about this event or this job opportunity, and this might be something that you might want to explore. That has happened countless times for me. You're nodding your head yes.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think that is those things do happen. And where, again, I think we just put all this pressure on, and it is a big deal. There is some pressure that comes with it when you're making a new career move, or when you're making that decision to change jobs or change industries. And it definitely can feel so scary when regardless of what point you're at in your career. But I think, in that case, having that conversation with someone, and then the opportunity does come, right? And that opportunity can be an event, or maybe it is an actual job opportunity, or it's something else that you weren't even expecting. But I think kind of having that intention, starting those conversations, and really recognizing that this idea behind networking and cultivating these opportunities, it doesn't mean you need to go out and do 100 things tomorrow. It can be as simple as who are the last 5 people that you texted or talked to on the phone in your day-to-day life, and saying I'm going to let that person, one of those 5 people, know that I'm thinking about making a career change. And it can be as simple as that. Text your best friend right now and say this is what I'm thinking about in terms of my career or my goals for the next year. And that can be the one step, and I think that's another big piece of it, that we work a lot of this up to be these huge things, and that you need to spend hours on it. And there's a level of that, but I also think we can take really small and intentional steps that can have an enormous ripple effect that we could never plan for or imagine.
Yeah, Cassie, it is evident that you are an incredible career coach. And, I just put myself in the shoes of someone that needs help. And just hearing you say that, taking the small steps, I feel that that would relieve some of that pressure.
Mm,
And someone can easily think, I can do that. I can reach
mm,
out to 5 people. So kind of removing some of that, the intimidation behind that process, and just
mhm.
simplifying, and that the
Yeah.
small steps can can be a huge part of whatever it is that you want to do.
Mhm.
So you are extremely insightful. We can talk about this for hours.
Yes.
And hence why you have 2 podcasts. Well, you are the host of Happenstance, but you are the co-host of Your Career GPS. And so I obviously want to promote these podcasts. Can you share a little bit about what people would expect from listening to both podcasts?
Yeah, sure. So Your Career GPS is a very practical podcast, short episodes, like 30 minutes or so, really geared towards college students, young professionals, and providing that practical advice. Like, how do you approach an interview? What section of your resume, a specific section of your resume, or other things like that. So definitely to any college students, young professionals, a great podcast to kind of get that like expert advice from guests who are other career coaches, HR professionals, all across the board there. And then Happenstance is a podcast that I launched in May of 2022 and really geared around everything that we're talking about today. I like to take a little bit more of a longer form with those episodes. So some of them are 40 minutes, some of them are an hour. I always say, let's see where Happenstance takes us. And I genuinely mean that throughout the conversations, that we kind of follow along the twists and turns. But with that podcast, my goal with it, really in the simplest sense, is to tell really cool career stories and looking at how people have found their way to their different careers, looking at the passion projects and side gigs and other things that people are doing, and kind of those really fun and inspiring and insightful happenstance moments along the way that have led to a lot of different things. So it's definitely, I always say it's a career adjacent podcast where it has a big career focus, but talking with people who have, launched like series on TikTok that have gone viral and have kind of led them down a different path, or talking with other people who've started jewelry businesses on Etsy. I have Liz was on there to talk about career coaching and how her and other career coaches got into this path. So in a nutshell, just telling some really cool career stories with that happenstance lens.
I highly recommend people to check out both podcasts. I've listened to episodes from both, and I have learned so much as well. And so I definitely, promote the podcast. I'll put the links in my show notes as well, so people can
Thank you.
catch up and hear all the wonderful insight that you offer. Cassie, it was such a pleasure having you as a guest on my podcast. I had so much fun, and I am confident that you and I are going to be having a lot of future conversations.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we're on the trend now. I'm like, we can't stop. We have so much more to talk about, but I love this so much. It's always fun to kind of switch seats and be a guest. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.